Welcome back to Nonstop Recap. Today we'll be going over the 2018 thriller, My Teacher, My Obsession. The movie opens on a high school custodian finishing his shift when he hears a loud noise and goes to investigate. He hears a scream from inside a classroom and enters to find a young senior, Kyla, cowering on the floor. He runs to find help when another girl, Riley, grabs him and tells him to run. When she lets go, we see she's left bloodstains on his shirt. After an opening credit sequence featuring creepy, ominous photographs, we cut to Riley and her father, Chris, as they arrive for their first day at a new high school. Chris is an English teacher, and it's clear that Riley's upset about their recent move. After Chris enters the school, we see Kyla taking photographs for the school yearbook when her camera lands on Chris. Popular girl Trisha interrupts before noticing Chris herself and voicing her intent to seduce him. In class, Chris catches Trisha using her phone and uses the moment as an opportunity to compare modern lyricism to classic literature. He asks the students about their favorite songs and gets into an argument with Kyla when he accuses the Beatles of cultural appropriation. She accuses him of appropriating the cool teacher stereotype, which he responds to with a speech about just how cool he really is. After class, Chris waves to Riley in the hall and Kyla notices her embarrassment. Meanwhile, Trisha stays behind to chat Chris up. Kyla later bonds with Riley in the computer lab, and Riley admits that it's embarrassing to have a teacher for a father. Nonetheless, she agrees to help Kyla study for Chris's class. Kyla sees Chris leaving school with Riley and snaps numerous photos of him. Riley later tells Chris about her new friend, and he says that he approves. Meanwhile, Kyla gets home to find her mother Jess doing cardio for the first time in a year. As Jess goes to shower, Kyla notices a new dress and learns that Jess has secretly begun dating someone she met at the grocery store. That night, Kyla fantasizes about a shirtless Chris entering her room and making slow, gentle love to her. At their study hall date, Kyla and Riley are discussing boys when Kyla says she's looking for someone mature. She learns that Chris left Riley's mother after learning about a long-term affair and tells Riley that her own father left when she was a child. Riley excuses herself to the bathroom, and Kyla takes the opportunity to go upstairs and rub her face on Chris's bed sheets. In class, Trisha breaks her pencil and uses this as a bizarre segue to tell Chris that she knows what she wants. He's decidedly unimpressed, which amuses both Kyla and Riley. Later, Trisha warns Riley against hanging out with Kyla and invites Riley shopping with her. Kyla overhears this and angrily confronts Riley, telling her that Trisha's clearly obsessed with Chris and that she previously got a history teacher fired by messing around with him. Kyla later calls Riley to suggest throwing a party for her birthday. She then brings up Trisha, which prompts Riley to say that Chris would never date a student, especially since he just started seeing someone he met at the grocery store. Kyla's mortified as the doorbell rings and she answers it to discover that Chris is her mother's mystery date. Chris presents Jess with flowers and Kyla goes to put them in a vase but intentionally spills water on Chris when she returns. Since he doesn't have a change of clothes, Kyla suggests he and Jess have their date at home. Over dinner, Chris asks Kyla about her college plans, and her mother gives her grief for only applying to Emerson with no backups. Kyla tells Chris that she knows what she wants, because that line worked so well for Trisha. When Chris and Jess start to flirt heavily, Kyla excuses herself from the table. Later, Chris and Jess are making out when Kyla screams and rushes downstairs. She tells them someone was peeping through her window while she was changing and that she'd feel safer if she stayed downstairs with them. Jess goes to make some tea and Kyla takes Chris's hand to thank him for staying. She learns that he doesn't need to get home soon anyway because Riley's staying out all night with Trisha. The next morning, Kyla walks in on Chris coming out of the shower. They later stop to pick up Riley on the way to school, where Kyla pointedly tells Chris that she enjoys photojournalism because you can learn about people by observing them when they think nobody's watching. Chris asks if Kyla's ever observed him, but she evades the question. She then reveals that she got into Emerson but hasn't told her mother yet. Riley hops in and picks up on tension between Chris and Kyla. In the dark room at school, Kyla confronts Riley about hanging out with Trisha. Riley gets defensive and reveals that, according to Trisha, Kyla was the one fooling around with the history teacher. They argue and Riley leaves. Kyla then accosts Trisha and tells her to leave Riley alone. That night, Kyla takes a sultry selfie of herself in bed. Riley tries to make up with Kyla the next day, but she's interrupted when numerous copies of Kyla's suggestive selfie fall out of her locker, and she runs off embarrassed. She shows them to Chris, and Riley sees him trying to comfort Kyla in his classroom. Kyla's mom later asks her where the pictures came from, hoping that nobody's taken advantage of her. Kyla reassures her, also telling her that she got into Emerson. When Jess says that she'll at least have Chris when Kyla leaves the nest, Kyla suggests that she and Chris are moving too fast. Kyla finds Riley in the computer lab and they make up after Kyla admits that she really was the one fooling around with a history teacher. But she assures Riley that she only sees Chris as a surrogate father figure, and Riley understands. Chris later takes Kyla home and Kyla takes his picture before going upstairs to reveal a whole box of secret Chris photos. Later, as Chris gets ready to leave for a date with Jess, Riley apologizes for being resentful about their new school. At Kyla's house, Chris's phone blows up with suggestive text from Trisha, which Kyla finds and shows to her mother. Jess breaks up with him and Kyla meets him at his truck to make a move on him. He initially rejects her, but then she climbs into his lap and makes out with him before abruptly leaving. Back in her room, she reveals a hidden phone rigged to send Chris messages under Trisha's name. She breaks the phone and leaps into bed triumphantly. During an English exam, Trisha asks Chris for help while throwing her cleavage in his face, but Kyla makes a power play by returning a coat Chris left at her house. Irritated, Trisha returns to her desk, but the cops soon arrive and call her out of class. After the bell, Kyla tries to smooch Chris in his classroom, but he sends her away. That night, Kyla's mother bakes cookies and expresses hopelessness about her dating life. During the conversation, we learn that Trisha was called out because they found a broken phone in her locker containing Kyla's photos, implicating her in the prank on Kyla's locker. Kyla goes to Riley's party where she gives Riley a flask of alcohol before heading inside while Riley stays out back with her guests. Kyla goes upstairs to Chris's office where he's still hung up on Jess. She comforts him and starts to undress him. He tells her no, but she presses on until he gives in, undressing her and laying her on the bed. Before they can get too far, Riley discovers them and storms out with Chris in pursuit. He notices her flask and they argue in front of everyone at the party before Riley leaves. Chris goes upstairs where Kyla tells him that Riley has a drinking problem and tries to reignite their hookup, but Chris says he has to go find Riley. Kyla tells him that she won't let him go and gets angry that Chris would prioritize his daughter over her. As Riley cries alone and Chris drives out to look for her, Kyla jealously smashes Riley's photo. The next morning, Jess gets a text from Riley saying that they need to talk. Chris tries to approach Riley at school, but she won't let him get a word in. During class, Chris tries to ignore Kyla's responses to a question, but has to call on her when nobody else raises their hand. However, he criticizes her and says that her talking points are shallow. Riley leaves the class prematurely but returns after the bell with Kyla's mother. Jess slaps Chris for getting involved with Kyla and later tells Kyla that she's set up a meeting to discuss the situation with her principal. When she indicates that she no longer believes Kyla's story about Trisha and the photos, Kyla storms off and tries to call Chris. Chris ignores Kyla's call and Riley finally speaks with him. She isn't just angry, but afraid that he's ruining his career. He tearfully apologizes and Riley embraces him in forgiveness. Meanwhile, Kyla anxiously makes a call to Trisha. They meet at school where Trisha accuses Kyla of setting her up with a broken phone. Kyla invites Trisha to to take a swing at her, but Trisha refuses. So Kyla beats herself up, breaking her own fingers as Chris and Riley pull up. Riley calls the police and Trisha gets arrested. Kyla goes to the hospital for a cast and convinces her mother that Trisha really was guilty of the photo prank. Kyla apologizes for being disrespectful earlier and says that Jess was right not to trust Chris. When Riley and Chris show up to the hospital, Riley tells Kyla that things between her and Chris are over. Kyla apologizes and asks Riley to cover the school volleyball playoffs for her, giving Riley her camera. She then asks for a moment alone with Chris and tells him that their secret's officially safe. Chris tells her that she's crazy and that they have no secret, but Kyla disagrees. Chris decides to clean out his desk that night, believing it to be the only way he can get away from Kyla. After he leaves, Kyla's eyes land on a scalpel left out by her bed. Chris drives to school and leaves a voicemail asking Riley to meet him in his office. As she gets his message, the lights go out and Kyla surprises her before stabbing her in the gut with the scalpel. Kyla then goes to Chris's office and threatens to slit his throat before kissing him and telling him they'll be together forever. As Riley begins crawling to find help, Kyla holds her scalpel to Chris's eye and tells him to forget Riley and that she'll give him a new daughter. He pushes her violently across his desk, which is revealed to be the sound the janitor heard in the opening scene. Kyla kicks Chris in the leg and he goes down hard, hitting his head on the desk. When the janitor discovers her and goes to get help, she follows him closely. Riley warns him to run, but Kyla slits his throat. She then attacks Riley, who breaks away and makes it to the darkroom before Kyla corners her. Riley knocks Kyla's scalpel away and Kyla begins strangling her, but Riley gains the upper hand and beats Kyla with her own camera. Just before the final blow, Kyla tells her that she's not sorry. As Riley's loaded onto an ambulance, she sees Kyla and tells Chris that she's scared. He tells her everything will be okay. Months later, Riley checks out her scar while Chris revises his syllabus for another new school. He then gives Riley his truck keys so she can drive to her first day of college classes. As Riley drives off, we see Kyla watching from nearby. Thanks for watching Nonstop Recap.